Alright, welcome to the mastering tutorial. Here I have the same stuff from the FX tutorial pulled up. You have your drum rack and spectrum right here, and a drum loop with the same kick and snare. I just changed it up a little bit, so now it sounds like this. Because listening to the same kick and snare pattern the entire time got really boring. So now we're going to start the mastering process. Mastering is something that we do to sounds and synths so we can maximize the effectiveness of every single one of our sounds. You'll kind of understand this more as we go into the process. So the first thing we're going to do is master a kick drum. So first you're going to come over here to your drum rack and you're going to click this little icon in the middle right here. This pulls up a list of all of the samples in your rack. So we have our kick drum right here and our snare right here. So double click on the kick drum and the sample itself is going to get pulled out. Don't worry about all these knobs and things. All you need to know is this is where the sound comes from. So first thing we're going to do is put a spectrum on the kick drum. So you can just take the spectrum from over here or from your track list if you decide to, and put it right before the kick drum in that space. There it is. So let's listen to the kick drum sound and look at it on spectrum, and we'll think critically about what we need to do to the sound to maximize it. Okay, so we see we have a peak at about 76 hertz right here, and another smaller peak up here at 4.02 kilohertz or so. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is take away all of the frequencies that aren't important in the kick drum. All the stuff that is just taking up space. When you think of production, you should think of everything as trying to fit into a box. And so if something is using space in the box that it doesn't need to use, then you should take away that sound to make room for other sounds, especially in the low end, because as you guys know, if you play a bunch of notes in the low end at the same time, it sounds muddy. So you need to think of your low end as really focused, and then as you move out to the high end, you have more space for more sounds. Okay, so let's look at the bass drum again and look at what frequencies we can cut out. Okay, so I think that we can definitely cut out all the frequencies below the low peak. That peak is the meat of the bass drum, the really low part. So that, obviously being one of the most important parts of the bass drum, is the lowest sound we need. So let's get an auto filter. Right here. And drag it over here. Okay. So there's our auto filter. Now we want to cut out all frequencies below a certain point. So we're going to pick a high pass filter. And we want the hertz value to be right at our peak, which is at about 74.5 hertz. So let's come over here to our hertz count, here, and we'll type in 74.5 and press enter. Now we're going to turn up our Q value just a little bit to add some punch to the low end. Let's listen to the bass drum again and see if we notice a difference. This is without it, and with it. It's a subtle difference, but it definitely makes a huge difference, especially when you have a bunch of instruments and things going over it. So we cut out the low frequencies. Oh, and let's take a look at that in the spectrum. You can see that there's a lot less data below our peak. And if you add a sub to that, or a sub bass synthesizer to that, or something like that, it's going to make a big difference. Now, let's go move to the next step, which is compression. So we'll pull up a compressor. And now let's set the ratio to 3. Don't worry about what ratio means. It's kind of complicated, and you're welcome to do research on your own if you would like to know more about compression. Well, we're setting the ratio to 3. And a good rule of thumb is to set the threshold to the input value and then move it around from there. So let's look and see how loud our bass drum is in compressor. To right about here. So let's turn down our threshold to right about there. And now we're going to adjust the bass drum by ear until we think it sounds punchy enough. And I'll go to the extremes as I adjust this so you can hear what it sounds like when there's too much and when there's not enough. So that's too much. Just about right. Not enough. Alright, so that's pretty good. One last thing to note about the compressor. This output value is going to change the overall volume of the entire bass drum. So if you go through compression and it becomes a little bit loud, you can actually turn it down from here just a little bit. Okay, the next step is to decide if we need a gate effect or not. A gate is an effect that only lets sounds of a certain decibel value through. So we have that tail on our kick drum. If you listen, it sounds like it's in a room that has a lot of echo in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a gate to take away that tail. So pull gate over. Stick it right there. Now, this one is a little bit more by ear, but basically what you need to know is that anything below the threshold value is going to get silenced. And so what we're going to do is we're going to find the value of the tail, and we're going to stick our threshold value right above that. So let's hit a bass drum and see. So I think right about here. Let's listen to that and see what that sounds like. That's not low enough. So let's pull it back even more. Even more. Still too much. Let's lower this value to -69 or whatever. Let's see what that sounds like. No change, so that didn't do anything. But another thing you can do is delay the attack. The attack is how long it takes for the effect to happen. So if we turn up the attack, so that the effect doesn't happen until our good part of the bass drum is passed, then we'll be able to cut out part of the tail. See how that works. That's a little bit better. Let's turn up the hold value. No, that's about right, but we need for the effect to not clip so much. So let's turn up the release time, which is how long for the effect to reach full effectiveness, and see what that sounds like. That's a little too much release. That's pretty good, and it's not perfect, but you'll have to mess with that a little bit more on your own for it to get just right, but you get the idea.